Hi, and welcome to this unscripted walkthrough of Titan. This is our latest release from Fallout Music Group for creating hybrid scoring tools. So, Titan is created from 7 different Kontakt instruments. The first 4 are going to be designer style instruments, which, if you're familiar with Desecrator or some of our other releases, you're already familiar with this 2-layer engine approach that we've used a lot for designing sounds. The other 3 instruments are going to be just playable instruments for trailer hits and whooshes and subsonics, so booms and downers, and then a new trailer percussion instrument. So they're not going to have the 2 layers and designing things. It's really just about loading them up and playing them, get you started quick. But we're going to walk through the 4 designer instruments first because they're kind of the core of what Titan was created for. So let's get started. We're going to dive right in with the Pulse Designer. So here's the interface for Pulse Designer. I'm going to walk through it really quick and then we'll play some of the sounds. So if you are familiar with Desecrator, this is going to be very familiar because the effects and XY pad and stuff are very much the same. Where it differs is up here at the top. So this top section is going to be for the sequencer. So you can have it in sequencer mode, which uses this 16-step sequencer, or you can kick it into manual mode, at which point you're playing this just like a synth. So you'll just be able to play your own patterns however you like. It's kind of nice to have that option because sometimes you have a pattern that's more than you can fit into 16 steps, and it's easier just to play it yourself. Up here in the bars here is where you set your levels for each step, and you can drag across that and do whatever you want. Below that is the tuning for each step, so you can adjust that. Up here we have our reset levels and reset pitches. That's just going to undo everything I just did. Over to the right is you can kick it into triplet mode. You can have 16th notes, 8th notes, quarter notes, half notes, or whole notes for the length. Now I should say that's all based on a 4/4 timing. So this is all tempo synced and everything, but it's really, the whole note really means 4 quarter notes, and the half note really means 2 quarter notes. So if you're running in 6/8 timing, for example, it's going to be a little bit different. So just a heads up on that. This is all based on 4/4 timing. So you can switch between those using these buttons up here, or you can use the red keys, the key switches down here at C0 through E0, and pressing those is just going to walk through each of these. So as I press those keys on the keyboard, it's going to step through that. So you can actually change those on the fly while your pattern's playing back and get some interesting mix-ups. To the right of that is this pattern menu. So this doesn't change any sounds or anything like that. This just changes the pattern that is displayed here and used for the sequencer. So as you select those, there's a triplet menu and there's a straight patterns menu. And you can see how it changes things. So let me, before I go through the rest of the interface, we'll just play through a few sounds here and with the sequencer so you can hear. I'm going to just load up a couple of presets. So the sounds of this are definitely more on the aggressive side. This is really made for getting pulses that cut through your mix and fit into your hybrid scores easily. That's all of the sounds in these are very heavily processed, but they are dry. So it does leave you some freedom, but they're heavily processed to just get them to be extra punchy, extra tight, and extra, harsh, I guess you could say, but definitely on the aggressive side so that they cut through your mixes and you can hear them through your orchestra. So let's go ahead and try a couple of these pattern menus here just to show you that they don't change the sound. So there's the pattern menu. So again, you can kick it into manual mode. Then when I press a note, you're just going to hear that one sound. In sequencer mode, to the right here, we've got this gating. I'm going to load up just a straight pattern here and show you this gating. So this is just going to change the amount of space in between each note that's played to give you some control over how this sounds at different tempos especially. So here we go. And of course, if you wanted to, you could automate that while it's playing back to get some cool effects. Next to that is the active steps menu, which is just going to control which of the steps in the sequencer are active. So as you change that, you can see that it's the little lights above these change, so there's an indication of which steps are active. So if I were to drag that down to 4, I'd just get the first 4 steps, and they would just repeat over and over again. It's hard to tell on that pattern, but if I had something like that, Tron 16ths pattern playing, and I changed that down to just 4 steps. So below that are the main controls for each of the layers. So I'm just going to go through the layer 1 because layer 2 uses all the exact same settings and effects just for layer 2. So first we have the menu button here, the options button. When I click on that, I get randomization options. So throughout the interface, you'll notice there's a randomization for layer 1, randomization for layer 2, and a global randomization. These settings per layer allow you to pick what gets randomized when those buttons are pressed. So by default, I've just got it set to sources, so it's only going to change the sounds and not mess with all the effects. That's nice if you've already picked the sounds that you want in each layer and you don't want to mess with that, but you might want to just get creative with the effects and settings. So the settings is going to affect things like your EQ settings. Effects is going to change all of the onboard effects that we have available. And sources, you can either turn it off completely so you're not changing your sources, or you can even limit it to just some of the categories of sources that are available. So that gives you the freedom to do that. Below that is this option, velocity controls filter. So there's kind of a low pass filter that's waiting to be used, and it controls. If I turn that on, let me just show you. I'm going to turn that on for both layers, and then you'll notice as the sequence plays, I'll do something more extreme so you can hear it. At lower volumes, there's going to be less of the highs that pass through, and that'll change as it gradually goes up. Let me change my steps here. Make it a little less extreme. So if I had those options turned off, you'd hear just the velocities being controlled with this curve. But with that on, it's also applying this low pass filter, which can give you some really cool effects. And that also applies in manual mode. So softer notes are going to be filtered. You can get some cool effects. So that's what that does. And then you've got your pitch bend range here. This is really useful. Granted, you're probably not going to be bending your bass pulses a lot, but if you're using this like I do, I'm going to reset the levels here. If you're using this for kind of high pulses to cut through your mix and be kind of signature pulses up top, then you might want to bend. So you can set the bend range for each of the layers. Below that, actually next to that, we've got the menu for selecting the sounds. So you can either just arrow through them, or you can pull up this menu. It's all categorized. You've got dirty synths, clean synths, organics, and percussive sounds. So these are going to be non-tonal sounds over here. These are all created from organic instruments or just weird found sounds. And then the 2 sets of synths. Down at the bottom, you've got your page buttons, which go through the pages of available sounds. So there's quite a few sounds in here. to go through and mix up. So when you're, I don't know how many combinations you can come up with, but thousands of combinations are available when you have 2 layers, each picking from, 100 plus sounds. So next to that, you've got the randomize button, which just randomizes, like I said, whatever you've got selected here for the layer. There's a lock button, which doesn't lock the layer, it just locks randomization for the layer. So if I hit the global randomize and that layer is locked, it's not going to do anything to it. And below that, low, mid, and high gain. Those are just for your EQ. Those can get fairly extreme, so be careful dialing those in. And then there's the release, just your ADSR release. Below that are the 4 onboard effects for each layer. So there's a phaser with all of its settings, a distortion, freak. This one's really cool, but it does make some wild sounds. So if you're just looking for something weird, dial this one in and start playing with all the knobs here, especially the frequency knob, and you'll get some really cool sounds. And then a delay. And you can turn each of those on with these buttons below here. So in this case, I might be looking at the phaser settings, but phaser's not active at this point. So distortion's the only one that's active on this layer. Exact same setup over here for layer 2. And in the middle, we have our XY pad. So the XY pad blends between the wet and onboard reverb and the totally dry signal that's by default. And that's done with the Y-axis up, down. And left to right on the X-axis blends between layer 1 and layer 2. So let me just play this back and show you the difference. We'll go dry first. And you can hear those are nice and tight and dry. And then if we go up, we're getting the reverb. Now the reverb can be adjusted with this button. So right now there's a pretty big pre-delay on it. Maybe turn that down. Maybe we want a longer decay and size and not so much damping. It's a little big for a pulse, but you get the idea. Below the reverb controls here, by the way, are the MIDI control numbers that you can assign to the XY pad. So it's by default 14 controls the wet dry blending and 15 controls the layer blending, but you can change that to whatever you want. And then you can automate that easier without having to use, host automation lanes. So as you can hear, really automating this motion through the XY pad is really what gets you kind of some of the magic in the sounds. And that is it for the Pulse Designer. Once you load it up and start playing with it, you're going to be caught up in it for a long time, I'm sure. Let's go ahead and move on to the Signature Sound Designer next. So here we are with the Signature Designer of Titan. And I'm not going to go into details with all of the effects down here at the bottom because that's the same across all of the designer instruments. So we'll speed through a lot of this, but just wanted to play some of the sounds, give you an idea of what we're dealing with. So real quick, again, you've got your settings here for the randomization options, some options for whether the pitch wheel controls pitch, whether or not the mod wheel controls the low pass filter. That's all per layer. The rest of this is really the same. A lot of it. So I'll just touch on the things that are different. If you want details of the whole GUI, just go back to the beginning of the video and watch the Pulse Designer section. So our menu for these signature sounds is pretty large. You got 3 pages of synth sounds here, a couple pages of organics, things based on 2 pages of things based on the human voice, and then a bunch of low-enders, kind of Brahmy, rippy, low-end kind of signature sounds. So you got, I can't remember, 150 or something sounds to work with and combine in the 2-layer engine. So below your menu selections is a stretch and shrink option here. So a lot of times if you've got 2 sounds loaded up, one might not be the same length as the other. So it's helpful to be able to kind of stretch or shrink one of them to match the other so that you can get your custom sound just the way you like it. Then you've got your pitch tuning, your coarse one here, your fine tuning here. That's just going in cents. And then you've got your release, your low pass and your high pass filters, your EQ, and then you've got all those same effects. In the middle here, again, you've got your reverb controls and your MIDI CC settings for the XY pad, and you've got the XY pad that controls the dry signal and wet and the blend between the two layers. So let's just play a few of these sounds. And of course you can use your pitch wheel because bending your signatures is often just as important as anything else. This is a good example of the stretch right here on this sound actually. So if we listen to the right sound, it's pretty long. On the left, if I were to have that at its default length, it's much shorter. So when I play those together, I'll put it dry. So it's nice to just be able to stretch that out. I love having them dry and being able to use the mod wheel or a controller to control this to blend the reverb as it plays. It's very useful. Just play a couple more here. So as you can hear, there's there's thousands of combinations that you can make between the two layers, and then with automation on the XY pad and the stretching, you can really create an unlimited number of signature sounds for your pieces. And then combining that with all of the onboard effects, especially the freak option that just makes some weird modulations, you can really come up with things that really will set your track apart and define your sound without just having to load up a preset and you're stuck with whatever reverb was on it and delays and everything else. You get this nice dry signal, you can add your reverb, and then you can of course even keep it dry and just use your own external effects. So that's the Signature Designer. Let's go ahead and move on to the Ping Designer next. All right, here is the Ping Designer of Titan. So trailer pings are something that sometimes you don't give a whole lot of thought to, but you find yourself needing a lot. So here we have a way for you to create your own pings and make them kind of your own unique sounds. So again, I'm not going to go through all of the effects because it's the same across all the designer instruments, and even in the middle here, it's the same. We've got your wet and dry and your blending between the two layers, so we're not going to talk about all of that. And the settings are pretty much the same. You can limit what your randomization does. So I do want to show you the amount of sounds that are available. So again, we've got our categories. There's 2 pages worth of sounds for all of these categories, as you can see. So there's quite a few sounds to pick from here. So let's just play it so you can get an idea of what you can create with the Ping Designer. We'll go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and talk about the Rise Designer next. All right, the Rise Designer is one of my favorites. You've probably used some of our other products with the Riser Designers. It's very similar. These are all new sounds, and there are a lot of them. So let's pull up the menu here, and you'll see we've got 3 pages worth of organic sounds. These are all like, Foley type noises, dragging things across concrete, whatever it is, all heavily modified and processed. We've got our synth section here, another few pages worth of synths. Strings, so these are live strings recorded over in Budapest. So we've got, full sections here, and we've got them broken down into quartets. We've got just the cello, just the quartets, doing trems, doing sulpont trems. We've got versions of them that are kind of plain, some that are hyped, some that are extremely hyped. We've got violins by themselves. So there's a lot of options here, and getting these really nice, clean, full, rich string risers was a really important part of this Rise Designer, because I wanted to be able to use this for any type of composition, and having these string risers is so useful in both hybrid when you mix it with some synths, and even if you're just doing orchestral compositions and you want some risers to go behind those big moments of your trailer. So then over here, the last category is a smaller category. These are just ultrasonic ones. So they're very high pitched ones. So if you just need some extra high hype on top of something else, this is where you're going to go for that. So much like our other Rise Designers, they come in 3 lengths. There's a 2-bar, a 4-bar, and an 8-bar of each riser. Now that is 8 bars based on 4/4 timing. So it's essentially, 32 quarter notes, if you want to look at it that way. The 4-bar is 16 quarter notes, and the 2-bar is 8 quarter notes. So if you're in 6/8 timing, it is going to be a little bit different. So just be aware that those bar lengths are based on 4/4 timing. So down here at the bottom, there is a 3rd layer. This is very much like Desecrator if you own that. It's the Exciter layer. It has its own menu with another 18 sounds. These are sounds that they don't have any sound for the first number of bars. They're just to add a little extra hype at the end of the riser. So if you're playing an 8-bar riser and you've got one of these exciters on, it'll only play during the last 2 bars of the riser. And if you're playing the 4-bar, this will only play during the last bar of the riser. And if you're playing the 2-bar riser, this is only going to play during the last half bar. So they just add a little extra hype at the end, make it a little more extreme right at the tail end of the riser, which is often what you want. So let's just play through some of these sounds. Oh, I should mention middle C and then the D3 and E3 are the notes that you use. So E3 plays the 2-bar version, D plays the 4-bar version, and middle C plays the 8-bar version. I'm going to play just the 2-bar versions for this because they're faster and we don't have to listen. We might check out a couple of 4-bars. I should note these are all recorded individually. So the 2-bar version isn't just the last 2 bars of the 8-bar. It's actually recorded separately and created as a 2-bar version. So you get the same climb as you would on the 8-bar, but condensed into a 2-bar version. So it's quite a bit different, especially with the live strings. They are actually played in 2-bar, 4-bar, and 8-bar versions. So they sound a lot better. Let's go ahead and just play through a few. All right, maybe a couple more. to hear the longer version of that. So as you can see, you can come up with some really kind of, crazy sounds here. Let's go ahead and just for fun. Okay, I've got effects turned off for randomization, just the sources. So let's just randomly generate a couple of risers here and play the 2-bar versions. I quite like that one. Let's play the longer version. So as you can see, it's really easy to generate risers. Just using the random option alone for the sources gets you all sorts of different kinds of risers. Now, I'm the first one to say I don't like using in my compositions, I don't like to actually use the MIDI playback of risers. I prefer the audio. So I usually use these designers to create the riser at the length I want. And then I play that in and then I bounce it to audio immediately because I just like to be able to move anywhere throughout the composition and hear what it sounds like and not have the riser triggered in the middle or something. So that's how I use it, is just to generate the riser. Plus, a lot of times I like to maybe change the curve of the rise depending on my compositions. So I like to just dump that to audio so I can mess with the curve of the volume and everything as well. So these are all set to cut right at the end of the 2, 4, 8 bars. So there's not a tail included on it. They do tempo sync. So they'll move with your tempo. Obviously, if you start going extremely slow, they're all recorded at 120 beats per minute. So dropping down to 60 beats per minute, they're not going to sound as good. Going up to 180, you're not going to sound as good. So just bear that in mind. I do like to just use these as designers and export them as audio. Also, these are included, all of these individual dry versions of these risers are all included in the wave folder for the instrument. So let's go ahead and move on to the non-designer instruments now. We'll start with trailer percussion. All right, what you'll notice as you pull this up is it's a much simpler interface for these non-designer instruments. They're not made to, create all weird effects and all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty straightforward. We're going to just walk through the GUI elements and then play some sounds. So you've got your basic 3-band EQ here. You've got your reverb settings here. You control the amount of reverb, same as the other instruments here. Now, I will say with the trailer percussion, the sounds do have some reverb baked into them. So this is really adding extra reverb. But these are meant to play short and tight. So the natural reverb you won't really notice unless you hold out the note for a long time or crank the release up. Over here we have the velocity sensitivity. We have the release. And we have got your low and high pass filters. And then here's your MIDI CC assignments for the XY pad here. Since there's no layers to blend on this, the left-right blending of the XY pad actually controls the amount of saturation we're adding to the signal. So let's just play. What you'll notice down here on the keyboard, from C1 all the way up to F3, those are your sounds. Then they're duplicated from C4 all the way up to C6. From C4 all the way up to F6. That's just so you can play them easier. So they're 3 octaves apart. So it just makes it easier playing really fast patterns if you can do it in a dual mapped system like this. So let's go ahead and just kind of play through some of these sounds and let you hear. And all of these are recorded and sampled and layered and everything individually and not duplicating samples. So if you want to combine them, you're not going to have weird phasing issues. These have become one of my all-time favorite things I've ever made, actually, because they're so useful, especially with the release knob dialed down like this. So you're just getting short, punchy sounds. Obviously, with it cranked up, you get all the reverb tail, which is still great. But when I'm doing action style or even most of my hybrid work, I usually have that cranked down because I like to be able to play short and punchy stuff. That's about it. So I think you'll find this makes it into your templates for all of your drums in your arsenal for your hybrid composing. Let's go ahead and move on to the trailer hits. Okay, much like the trailer percussion, it's a very simple interface. There's no layers or anything like that. These are just straight up trailer hits. Not as punchy as the percussion, definitely more of an impact type sound. And with whooshes, optional whooshes, I should say. But let's walk through the interface here real quick. Again, you got your EQ, your reverb, your XY controls, your velocity sensitivity and release, a low pass and a high pass filter, and your MIDI CC controls for the XY pad. Again, you're just adding reverb. The sounds do have reverb baked into them, even more so than the trailer percussion. And then the left, right on the XY pad adds saturation to the sound. So down below that, here's where it differs from the trailer percussion a little bit more. You can pick the option for the whooshes that are played with the hits. So the way the keyboard is laid out, it starts with a hit down here on C1. Then the next key is going to be that same hit, but with a whoosh first. And then it'll have play on D. It's the next hit and followed by that same hit with its whoosh sound. So there's quite a few sounds across the keyboard here. And that's just the way it's laid out. Every other note is the whoosh version. And the whoosh that is played is based on whatever you select here. So these are lengths. So 1 quarter note, 2 quarter notes, or 4 quarter note lengths. And then you have an option to either play the hit at the end of the whoosh or just play the whoosh by itself. So if you prefer to just use this as whooshes only, then every other note is going to play just a whoosh and no hit. So let's just go through some of the sounds here. I'm going to keep it, fairly dry. I'll leave it somewhere around there. And then with the short whoosh, with a slightly longer whoosh, and with the longest whoosh. If I turn that hit off, so what I like about laying it out like this is that you're not always stuck with a whoosh. You can just play the hit by itself. And then in cases where you do want the whoosh to come in, you can just use the next note up on the keyboard to get the whoosh version of it. And that's about it. So you got a keyboard full of nice hits and whoosh hits, and what else could you want in hybrid music, right? Let's go ahead and move on to the trailer Subsonics next. Okay, so right off the top, the interface is identical to the trailer hits interface. Same deal. Added reverb, saturation, EQ, reverb, velocity sensitivity, release, low and high pass filters, and MIDI CC options. Again, all of these, these are downers and booms, right? So the booms are across the first 2 octaves, and the downers are across the second 2 octaves, and they're laid out exactly the same as the trailer hits, where you have the boom or downer, and the next key up is going to be that same boom or downer, but with one of the 3 available whooshes. So let's just play some of these. Here's so we've got it set to a 2 quarter note whoosh with a hit at the end. So first the boom by itself. And then with the whoosh. And then we get into the downers up here on starting on C4. And those have whooshes. Let's go ahead and set that to a longer whoosh. So while this is the smallest instrument in Titan with, just a dozen booms and a dozen downers, then you have, obviously multiply that by 3 for all the whooshes that are included. It's actually super useful. And again, if you really like the whooshes but you don't need the downers and booms, you can always just turn off the hit at the end and just play the whooshes. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough of Titan. Check it out and see what you think. I think you'll find that all of these instruments fit nicely into your templates and into your compositions, and hope you love it. Thanks for watching.